Hello, my name's Guy Salter of SME Solicitors. I'm a partner and I'm the head of the employment department. I'm going to be talking about menopause in the workplace. That has obviously garnered a lot of media attention recently, and it clearly has a debilitating effect on day-to-day living. Clearly, as a result of the media attention, from such people particularly as Davina McCall, women are more open about speaking about it, which can only be a good thing. There has been discussion about whether it should be made a specific protected characteristic under the Equality Act 2010, whether it becomes protected such as race, disability, etc. The calls for that have been resisted on the basis that it is considered that the legislation adequately covers it already. So what do employers and employees need to be aware of? Well, all women and transgender people who no longer identify as women, shall we call them menopausal people, can be subject to the menopause. It's obviously part of the natural aging process and affects 40-year-olds to 50-year-olds usually. There are 3 million menopausal people over 50 years of age in work in the United Kingdom at the moment. So, in relation to the Equality Act 2010, whether you have a disability depends upon the severity of the effects and the circumstances as to whether you may be able to claim that you have a disability. A disability is defined in the Act as a physical or mental impairment which has a substantial and long-term adverse effect upon a person's ability to carry out their normal day-to-day activities. An employer, to fall foul of committing an act of disability discrimination, must have actual knowledge or have enough information to have an idea that someone has a disability. A common defence available to an employer in these circumstances is that the symptoms or effects of whatever avails the employee are not severe enough. Often an employee may try and claim that they are being discriminated against for something arising from a disability, which as a result they receive less favourable treatment from the employer. Something to do with their performance, their attendance at work, and in some cases even their conduct. We can see that the menopause could affect all those particular 3 examples. The other potential areas of claim open to an employee in these circumstances relates to a failure to make reasonable adjustments, which we'll refer to later on, harassment and victimisation, and also direct and indirect discrimination. There is limited case law on matters concerning the menopause, and most of this case law is not through the appeal courts, which means it doesn't form a precedent that the law will have to be followed in the future. However, an example from a tribunal in relation to someone claiming they have been discriminated against because they suffered from the menopause. A lady was having hot flushes, which sometimes became 7 to 12 times a day. They had palpitations and anxiety as their stress increased, distorted sleep because of night sweats. All these resulted in fatigue, memory, and concentration difficulties. As a result of that, the tribunal decided these effects were severe enough to mean that they had a disability for the purposes of the Equality Act 2010, and therefore they could proceed with their claim. You can also have sex and age discriminations as well in relation to the menopause, but these are not so prevalent as those in relation to disability. A recent example of this involves a manager who is meting out less favourable treatment to an employee. There were repeated references to her being a dinosaur, clearly age discrimination, and menopausal. The manager at the time of making these comments was aware of the lady's menopausal symptoms. The comments clearly related to her age and sex, and therefore the tribunal decided that again, there was sex and age discrimination involved. So what can an employer do to ameliorate the effects of this? Well, the first thing an employer can do is introduce a menopause policy. Within that policy, I suggest it should state that open conversations with managers are encouraged, and those conversations should consider what support an employee may need and generally what other steps could be taken to alleviate the effect of the menopause upon the employee concerned. It's also important within that policy to state and actually put into practice that the managers will be trained to deal with employees who are suffering the effects of the menopause. So those managers need to be trained with the knowledge, so if an employee comes to see them to discuss it, they know what they are talking about, be they male or female, and that for the purposes of those meetings, a private meeting space is provided. Also, the manager must set aside sufficient time to discuss the matter, rather than saying, for example, I've got 10 minutes, let's just discuss it now. It's also important for an employer and to provide within the menopause policy private and secure storage facilities, such as for sanitary products, and also to ensure that suitable toilet and drinking water facilities are available. For those workplaces that operate dress codes or have uniforms in place, it is important for an employer to review the suitability of the uniform and the dress codes, and sometimes to make exceptions for employees who are suffering with the menopause, provided that that does not draw attention to them, because obviously that wouldn't help them either. It's also important within the policy to state where staff can obtain assistance, so to make them aware of it, such as menopausal charities or support groups. In the future, I think we are going to see more cases related to the menopause as people are more open to talking about the situation. And I think that can only help employers and employees to get a better working relationship around the problems that can occur in relation to menopause. If you want to have more information about what you've heard me talk about, then please contact us. The same applies if you want a copy of the slides.